Sound moves differently in old-growth rainforests. The Sitka spruce here in the Olympic Peninsula stands 300 feet tall, and when elk move through them, you hear it, hooves cracking on deadfall cedar, the wet snap of salal branches, breath condensing in cold air like steam vents. I've been a wildlife biologist for 8 years. I know what 40 Roosevelt elk sound like when they cross open ground. On September 11th, I watched a herd of 40 move through a subalpine meadow in complete silence. No hoof strikes on stone. No disturbed grass. No breath fog, even though it was 38 degrees and I could see my own exhalations hanging in the pre-dawn air. They moved like a film with the audio stripped out. Smooth. Coordinated. Wrong. That's when I knew they weren't elk anymore. I just didn't know what they'd become, or that I was already being measured for replacement. This was day 7 of what should have been a routine assignment. I have a PhD in wildlife ecology from University of Washington. 8 years specializing in Roosevelt elk, behavior, migration patterns, population dynamics across Olympic National Park. I've deployed GPS collars, built predator-prey models, analyzed movement data sets most people would find mind-numbing. 3 years ago, I used statistical modeling to predict a chronic wasting disease outbreak before it happened, identified isolated herd movements that suggested infection vectors, got containment protocols in place early. Saved probably 200 animals. That's the kind of work that builds a career. My current assignment was a 2-week solo population census in the Hoh River drainage. Roadless wilderness, accessible only by an 18-mile approach hike from the nearest trailhead. Standard protocol for this kind of survey work. Except for 2 things. During the briefing, my supervisor, Dr. Ellen Cross, said something odd. If you need extraction for any reason, radio before 72 hours. After that, we can't guarantee retrieval. I assumed it was a weather window concern. Helicopters, fog, logistics. The other thing, the Forest Service provided redundant supplies. 2 tents, 2 GPS units, 2 satellite phones, 2 of everything. Far more than standard protocol required. Day 1 seemed routine, until I checked the trail camera footage. I set up 12 motion-activated trail cameras on day 1. Standard non-invasive population monitoring, place them on known elk trails, near bedding areas, and water sources. Let the cameras do the work while you cover ground elsewhere. After 24 hours, all 12 cameras had triggered. Hundreds of captures. Every single image was corrupted. Not blurry, not overexposed. Corrupted in a way I'd never seen before. Elk-shaped voids where bodies should have been. Like someone had taken a photo negative and cut out the subjects with scissors, leaving empty silhouettes against the forest background. The metadata was intact, motion detected, infrared reflection confirmed, timestamps accurate. But the visual data was just absent. I started with rational denial. SD card corruption. Moisture damage. I'd set the cameras wrong, used an incompatible file format, maybe. I reformatted all 12 cards. I tested each camera on myself. The images came out fine, clear, properly exposed, no voids. I reset everything and redeployed. Second 24-hour period, same result. Motion detected. No images. Just moving silhouettes of emptiness, elk-shaped holes in reality passing through frame after frame. I switched to thermal imaging. Handheld FLIR unit, military surplus, reliable. Pointed it at the meadow where I'd seen the herd that morning. The screen showed ambient forest temperature, 8 degrees Celsius. Uniform across the entire field of view. No heat signatures. I could see the elk with my naked eyes, 40 animals, maybe 60 meters out, grazing in formation. The thermal units saw nothing. They were room temperature, or they weren't generating heat, or they weren't materially there in a way that interacted with infrared radiation. I don't know which possibility was worse. I decided to track them visually. Old-fashioned fieldwork. Follow the herd, document behavior, forget the technology. Except there was no sign to follow. No tracks. No scat. No browse damage on vegetation. 40 elk moving through soft ground, leaving nothing behind. I was trying to intercept the herd's projected route when I found the site. Disturbed ground. Broken salal branches. Ferns trampled flat in a pattern that suggested struggle. Something large had thrashed here, recently, within the last 12 hours based on the moisture content in the torn vegetation. But there was no physical evidence. No hair caught on bark. No tissue. No biological material of any kind. I called Coda over, my German Shepherd, 3 years old, trained specifically for wildlife scat detection and tracking. She's found bear dens in whiteout conditions and tracked cougar through creek beds. She doesn't spook easily. She got within 10 feet of the disturbed area and stopped. Hackles raised. Low whine in her throat. She backed up 30 feet and sat, refusing to move closer no matter what command I gave. I'd never seen her do that. I pulled sample bags from my pack and collected soil from the center of the disturbance. Standard protocol, document everything, even if you don't understand it yet. The samples went to the University of Washington Soil Ecology Lab when I rotated out 2 weeks later. The results came back coded as anomalous retest requested. The soil was chemically normal. Correct pH for Pacific Northwest temperate rainforest. Appropriate mineral content. Moisture levels consistent with the surrounding area. But it contained 0 organic DNA. Not low. 0. No plant root fragments. No fungal spores. No bacteria. No nematodes. No arthropod traces. This was an active wildlife corridor. Soil samples from just 5 meters away showed the usual genetic chaos you'd expect. Elk, black-tailed deer, Roosevelt elk, black bear, dozens of plant species, fungi, complete microbial communities. The disturbed area had none of it. It was sterile in a way that doesn't occur naturally. Even autoclaved surgical equipment has more biological information than this soil did. Something had removed all genetic material from a 3-meter radius. Not destroy it, removed it, like it had been extracted at a molecular level. That night, I radioed Dr. Cross. Told her about the cameras, the thermal imaging failures, the sterile soil. Her response came too fast. Too calm. Like she'd been waiting for this exact call. The satellite phone connected on the second ring. Cross. Ellen, it's me. I need to report some anomalies. I described everything. The camera fails. The thermal imaging showed nothing. The sterile soil. Coda's behavior. Her response was immediate. Scripted. No surprise in her voice at all. Document everything. Do not approach the herd directly. Maintain a minimum 200-meter observation distance at all times. I'm dispatching a retrieval team. Retrieval for what? The samples? The pause. Too long. I could hear her breathing on the other end. For you, if you remain on site longer than 72 hours from initial contact. My stomach dropped. Initial contact with what? The herd. Yes. What happens after 72 hours? The retrieval window closes, Ellen said. Her voice was flat. Clinical. You'll be considered unrecoverable. What does that mean, unrecoverable? It means we can't extract you. Do you understand? Document your observations, maintain distance, and prepare for extraction within the window. Ellen, what the hell is going on? The line went dead. I checked my watch. The first sighting, the silent herd crossing the meadow, had been 41 hours ago. I had 31 hours left. But unrecoverable didn't mean dead. Ellen hadn't said deceased or lost, or any of the terms we use for researcher fatalities in the field. She'd said unrecoverable, like I'd still be here, just unreachable. I tried calling back. The line connected. No answer, just static and then my own voice. Faint, distant. Document everything. Do not approach. It was what I'd been about to say when the call dropped. My exact words in my exact tone. But I hadn't said them yet. I was listening to a recording of something I was about to do. I disconnected and stood there in the growing dark, trying to make sense of it. An hour later, I heard footsteps outside my tent. Not Coda. She was inside with me, ears flat, growling low. I unzipped the door. A man stood at the edge of my camp. 70, maybe older. Gaunt. Wearing an old Forest Service jacket, patches faded almost to nothing. He was holding a file folder. Stamped across the front in red ink. Classified. Samuel Hodge. The man said. Retired. Worked this drainage from 1979 to 98. He moved with a limp, favoring his left leg. Gaunt face, deeply lined. He spoke like someone who'd been rehearsing this conversation for decades. He held out the file folder. I took it. The cover was water-stained, edges soft with age. Stamped across the front, a behavioral study, Olympic Peninsula, classified 1952. Inside, black and white photographs of elk herds. Normal looking. Grazing, bedding, moving through timber. Topographic maps of this exact drainage with zones marked in red ink. NO approach. A typewritten memo on Forest Service letterhead, signed by Dr. Raymond Voss, dated August 1952. At the bottom, a handwritten addition in faded blue ink. Do not count them. Do not track individual animals. Do not assign names or tags. Observation creates attachment. Attachment creates replacement. They've known since the 50s, Samuel said. Maybe longer. The elk you're seeing aren't elk anymore. Something took them. Left copies behind. The copies don't need to be eaten. Don't need to breathe. But they perform being elk until someone watches too closely. I looked up from the file. What happens then? You observe. You catalog. You assign identity, track individual animals, note behavior patterns, build data sets. The thing on the other side notices. It starts building a profile of you. Once it knows you well enough, how you move, talk, think, it makes a copy of you and pulls the original into wherever the real elk went. How do you know this? Samuel didn't answer. He lifted his shirt. His torso was covered in scars. Deep parallel cuts, old and white, running across his ribs and sternum in deliberate patterns. Letters. Initials carved into flesh. I stayed 13 days in 1981, he said. Started losing my reflection. I looked in a mirror and saw nothing looking back. Carved my initials into my chest to prove I was still made of flesh. Bled enough to anchor myself to the material world. It worked. Barely. He lowered his shirt and pointed at my hands. Check your footprints. I stared at him. Now, he said. I walked to the muddy patch near the creek. Soft ground, saturated from yesterday's rain. I looked down. No boot prints. Nothing where I was standing. I stood there staring at the ground where my boots pressed into soft mud. No prints. I could feel the cold wetness seeping through the leather, feeling my weight sinking in with each step. But the surface showed nothing. Smooth. Undisturbed. I crouched down and pressed both palms flat against the earth. No impression. I grabbed a stick from the ground and dragged it through the mud in a long line. Clear furrow. Perfect detail. I tried again with my hand. Nothing. Coda trotted past me toward the creek. Her paw prints appeared in the mud, clear and deep. Mine didn't exist. Samuel stood 20 feet back, watching. "It started," he said. "You've been here too long. Observed too much. It's sampling you now." I tried to rationalize it. Perspective trick. Angle of light. Water saturation makes the mud behave differently under distributed weight versus concentrated pressure. None of it made sense. I pulled off my right boot, pressed my bare foot into the ground. Still nothing. I was becoming unrecorded, interacting with the world but leaving no evidence of the interaction. "You've got maybe 18 hours before you stop leaving any trace," Samuel said. "No photographs. No video. No one will remember meeting you. You'll still be here, but you won't be registered anymore." I pulled my boot back on and walked to my tent, grabbed my field journal from the gear vestibule. The entries were all there: dates, weather observations, behavioral notes on the herd. But the handwriting looked wrong. Too uniform. Too consistent. Like a font designed to imitate cursive rather than actual human writing. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "September 18th, 2100 hours, footprints gone, Samuel Hodge present, need extraction now." The ink went down smooth. Blue ballpoint, same pen I'd been using all week. I looked back at the page 5 seconds later. The words had rearranged themselves into perfect block text. Mechanically spaced. Every letter is identical to the last time that letter appeared. My handwriting was being corrected. Standardized. Prepared for replacement. I closed the journal and looked up. 2 tents stood side by side in my camp. One I'd set up on day 1, weathered, guy lines slightly slack, vestibule door half open the way I always left it. The other was identical. Same model. Same color. Perfectly staked. I hadn't set up a second tent. It appeared while I was gone. My campsite had doubled. 2 tents. Same model, north face, 25, expedition grade. Same orange rainfly. Identical placement 15 feet apart. 2 sleeping bags laid out. 2 MSR cook stoves. 2 water filtration systems hanging from the same bear-proof food cache line. One side looked lived in. My gear scattered around the vestibule, dirt ground into the floor fabric, a coffee stain on the ground sheet near the door. The other side looked staged. Pristine. And used. Like a showroom display. I stepped into the new tent. Inside, a field journal. Same brand as mine. Right in the rain, olive drab cover. Same wear patterns on the corners. I picked it up and opened it. The entries matched mine exactly. Same dates. Same observations. Same data sets. But written in third person. The subject arrived at 0900 hours, September 11th. Subject established base camp. Grid coordinate north 47.8 degrees. West 123.9 degrees. Subject deployed 12 trail cameras on known elk migration routes. Subject observed herd at 1,530 hours. Meadow clearing, approximate count 40 individuals. The subject shows no awareness of the replacement process. Clinical tone. Detached. The word subject instead of I. This wasn't my journal. This was an external log. Something documenting me the way I'd been documenting the elk. I flipped to today's date. The entry was already filled in. The subject will discover a duplicate camp at 1,620 hours. The subject will experience cognitive dissonance. The subject will attempt to destroy duplicate materials. Attempts will fail. Subject's material density currently 74%. Replacement ETA, 16 hours. I checked my watch. 4:18 p.m. The log said I'd discover this at 4:20. I was 2 minutes early. Or the thing writing this had rounded up. Material density, 74%. 16 hours until replacement. I read it again, trying to find an alternative interpretation. Some way this could be a prank, a hallucination, contaminated water supply causing shared psychosis between me and Samuel. Nothing fit. The entry described what I was doing right now. What I was about to do next. I grabbed the duplicate journal, stepped out of the tent, and pulled my lighter from my jacket pocket. Flicked it open. Struck the wheel. Flame caught. I held the journal's edge to the fire. The pages didn't ignite. I held it there for 10 seconds. The flame touched the paper directly. Nothing. Not even scorching. I moved the lighter away from the journal and held it up. The flame died. Brought it close to the journal again. The lighter wouldn't produce flame anymore. Fuel was full. Flint sparked. But no ignition when the journal was near. The book wouldn't burn. And my lighter wouldn't work in its presence. I pulled the signal mirror from my survival kit. Standard gear, polished steel, 3 inches across, lanyard hole at the top. Hold it up to check my reflection. I saw myself. Jacket. Hair matted from 2 days without washing. Correct proportions. But the reflection didn't blink when I blinked. I blinked deliberately. Slow. Counted to 3. The reflection blinked back. 3 seconds of latency. I raised my left hand and waved. The reflection waved back. Same hand, same motion, but delayed. Like buffering videos. Like it was processing what I'd done and playing it back a few frames behind. The entity had created a copy. And it was learning my mannerisms. But the timing was off. It was watching, recording, and replaying. Not synchronized. Not yet. I spoke directly in the mirror. If you're me, say something. The reflection's lips moved 5 seconds later, mouthing the same words. Silently. No sound came from the mirror. It hadn't learned the voice yet. Just the shape of speech. The mechanics of forming words. I lowered the mirror, hands shaking. The replacement was already active. Already practicing being me. Refining motor patterns, facial expressions, the small unconscious movements that make a person recognizable. It was in rehearsal. Samuel's voice came from behind me. It's not in the mirror. I turned. He was standing at the edge of camp, his own reflection visible and synchronized in the mirror still in my hand. It's everywhere, he continued. The forest is full of it. It's not a single entity, it's distributed, practicing you in 1,000 places at once. Your gait, your posture, the way you tie your boots, the way you hold a pencil. He pointed toward the tree line. Through the gaps in the old-growth timber, I could just make out the elk herd. 40 animals. Motionless. Heads down like they were grazing. But there was no grass where they stood. That's what they are now, Samuel said. Rehearsals. Permanent copies stuck in observation mode. They're performing elk forever because no one pulled the originals out in time. They'll stand there for decades. Centuries, maybe. Perfect loops of behavior with nothing inside. I looked back at the mirror. My reflection still lagged 3 seconds behind. How do I stop it? I asked. Samuel's expression didn't change. There's only one way, he said. But it requires proof of material existence so violent the entity can't ignore it. The narrator pulls out a handheld EMF detector from their equipment pack. Standard field gear, used to check for electromagnetic interference that might affect GPS collar telemetry. They power it on. The small LCD screen flickers to life, showing ambient readings. Forest background, 0.3 milligauss. Normal. They point it at themselves. The reading drops to 0. Not low. 0. No electromagnetic signature. The human nervous system generates bioelectric fields, measurable, consistent, usually between 8 and 15 millivolts depending on activity level. Every biology student learns this. Every field researcher who works with telemetry equipment accounts for it. The detector should be picking up something. It shows nothing. The narrator tests the device on Samuel. He holds out his arm. The reading jumps to 12 millivolts. Normal human baseline. They test CODA. 8 millivolts. Normal for a mammal her size. They point it at a nearby hemlock tree. The reading shifts. Plants generate weak electromagnetic signatures from ion movement in their vascular systems. The detector shows 0.6 millivolts. Consistent with living tissue. Back to themselves, 0. The narrator pulls out a compass. Basic orienteering tool, liquid-filled, reliable. Hold it level. The needle swings magnetic north. Steady. They bring it close to their chest, within 6 inches, where a human body's mass should create a slight local gravitational influence, a tiny deviation in the magnetic field. The needle spins freely. No deflection. No interaction. Like they're not there. The narrator moves the compass towards Samuel. The needle wobbles slightly as expected, normal mass distortion. Back to themselves, free spin, no resistance. They're becoming electromagnetically neutral. The atoms that make up their body might still be present from their own subjective perspective, but they're losing the quantum properties that make matter interact with fields and forces. They're ceasing to push back against the universe. Samuel watches from a few feet away, expression grim. You're being converted, he says. Turned into observational data instead of physical matter. You're still conscious, still experiencing, but you're no longer made of particles that interact with electromagnetic fields, gravity wells, photonic pressure. The narrator tries to process this. From your perspective, you're still solid, Samuel continues. You feel your boots on the ground, feel the air in your lungs. But that's subjective experience, not objective reality. The universe is starting to treat you like information instead of mass. Is there a way to reverse it? Samuel hesitates. One researcher succeeded. One Dr. Marianne Coulter. Astrophysicist, not a biologist. She understood something the rest of us didn't. What? Quantum collapse, Samuel says. Particles exist in probabilistic states until they're observed or forced to interact. She found a way to force her own matter back into a definite state, make the universe acknowledge her as a collapsed waveform instead of a probability cloud. How? Intense localized interaction with a system that can't ignore mass, Samuel says. She used a principle called quantum decoherence. Created an environment where her body had to interact with enough external particles simultaneously that the universe couldn't keep treating her as non-material data. The narrator stares at the EMF detector, still reading 0 in their hand. What kind of environment? Samuel reaches into his pack and pulls out a small canister. Magnetic iron filings. Ferromagnetic particles, he says. Suspended in liquid. You saturate your system with them, ingestion, topical application. The particles force quantum interaction at a cellular level. Your body has to respond to their magnetic properties. It re-anchors you to material physics. He hands the canister to the narrator. It's not pleasant, and it only works if you're not past 80% conversion. The narrator looks at the label. Industrial-grade magnetite powder. How do I know my conversion percentage? Samuel points at the ground. If you still cast a shadow, you're under 80%. The narrator looks down. The afternoon sun is low, casting long shadows from the trees, from Samuel, from the tent. Where the narrator stands, nothing. No shadow at all. The narrator wakes at 0200 hours to the sound of their own voice. Not one voice. Dozens. Overlapping. Echoing through the forest from the direction of the elk herd's bedding area. They sit up in the tent, heart hammering. Coda is already awake, ears flat, a low continuous growl in her throat. The narrator unzips the tent and steps out into the cold. Grabbing their flashlight, they move cautiously toward the sound, boots crunching on frost-stiffened moss. 50 meters out, they stop. The herd is standing in a loose circle in a moonlit clearing. 40 animals. Motionless. Heads raised toward the canopy. And from their mouths, though their jaws don't move, come fragments of the narrator's voice. Observation log, day 2. Population estimate 40 individuals. Ambient temperature 7 Celsius. Herd moving northwest along ridgeline. The words are perfect. Pitch identical. Inflection exact. Even the small pause the narrator always takes before saying Celsius, because they still think in Fahrenheit first. It's the entity replaying their field recordings. Testing vocal patterns. Learning phonetics, cadence, and breath control. Preparing to speak as them. The narrator stands frozen, listening to their own voice split into 40 separate channels, each elk broadcasting a different fragment. GPS collar telemetry indicates. Scat analysis shows recent browse on. No sign of predation in the immediate. Then one elk turns its head, looks directly at the narrator, and speaks in their voice, fully synchronized, no delay. You should leave. You should have left 2 days ago. But you didn't. And now it's almost finished. The narrator stumbles backward, boot catching on a root. The elk doesn't follow. Doesn't move. It just watches. Then, as if receiving a signal the narrator can't perceive, all 40 elk lower their heads in unison and resume grazing. Except there's no grass where they're standing. Just bare rock and compacted dirt. Their mouths open and close. Jaws working. Tongues moving. Perfect mimicry of grazing behavior. But nothing is being consumed. They're rehearsing. Running lines like actors before a performance. Practicing elk in an endless loop, waiting for the day they might need to perform the role for someone new. The narrator backs away slowly, not turning their back until the herd is out of sight. Returns to camp as the sky begins to lighten. Samuel is awake, boiling water for coffee over a small camp stove. You heard them, he says. Not a question. The narrator nods. It's close now, Samuel says. Maybe 6 hours. Maybe less. At 0847 hours, they hear rotor blades. A helicopter. Low and fast, coming from the west. The narrator grabs their pack and runs toward the primary extraction LZ, clearing 3 kilometers from camp, the designated pickup point from the original mission brief. They crash through underbrush, lungs burning, legs pumping. Reach the clearing just as the helicopter touches down. Forest Service markings. 2 crew members stepped out. The narrator waves both arms, shouting. The crew walks directly past them. No acknowledgement. No eye contact. They load equipment from a cache the narrator didn't know was there, sealed cases, weatherproof containers. The narrator runs up to the pilot, standing 3 feet away, screaming their name. The pilot checks a clipboard, makes a notation, and boards the aircraft. The helicopter lifts off. The downdraft flattens the grass around the narrator. But the crew never saw them. They're already gone. The helicopter's rotor wash flattens the clearing grass in spiraling patterns, but the narrator feels nothing, no wind, no pressure, no downdraft against their skin. 2 rangers step out. They're translucent. Not invisible, but slightly out of phase, like heat shimmer, like looking at them through warped glass. The narrator waves both arms overhead, shouts their own name, runs toward the aircraft. The rangers walk directly past them. No eye contact. No reaction. They move with purpose toward the narrator's camp, except they're heading for the duplicate camp, the staged one with the pristine gear. The narrator follows, still shouting, close enough now to read the name tape on one ranger's uniform, Morrison. Morrison begins loading equipment into cargo nets. The unused tent, folded with mechanical precision. The perfect field journal. Cook stove that's never been fired. All the staged gear, pristine and ready for deployment. The narrator stands 10 feet away, screaming, "I'm right here. I'm the one you're supposed to extract." Morrison doesn't pause. Don't glance up. Finishes loading, secures the nets, gives a thumbs up to the pilot. Both rangers board. The helicopter lifts off, rotors biting air, climbing fast over the canopy. The narrator stands in the clearing, chest heaving, watching it disappear to the west. Samuel emerges from the tree line, moving slowly, leaning on a walking stick the narrator hasn't seen him carry before. "They retrieved the copy," he says. "That's what the 72-hour window was for. Extraction of the replacement before it becomes self-aware enough to question its own existence." The narrator checks their watch. 68 hours since initial elk contact. They'd missed the window by minutes. Or the entity had accelerated the process. "The original is considered lost in the field," Samuel continues. "Non-recoverable. They'll file a report, exposure, dehydration, researcher disorientation. Body never found. Case closed." "They know," the narrator says. "Ella knew. She sent me here knowing this would happen. They've been doing this since the 1950s, Samuel says. Send researchers in. Let the entity build copies. Extract the copies. Deploy them to positions where total compliance and zero deviation are advantageous. Deploy them where? Anywhere you need someone who'll follow orders without ethical hesitation. Research facilities. Intelligence agencies. Oversight committees. Samuel's expression is flat. Perfect sleeper agents. No tells. No inconsistencies. They believe they're the original. They have all the memories, all the skills. They'll pass polygraphs, biometric scans, and psychological evaluations. The narrator feels sick. "How many?" "I've counted 19 files," Samuel says. "But I've only been looking since 1998. There could be hundreds." "Where are the files?" Samuel points north, toward a ridgeline barely visible through morning fog. Old fire lookout tower. Decommissioned in 73. There's a cache underneath. The narrator starts walking. Samuel calls after them, "You don't have much time." maybe 4 hours before you hit total conversion. The narrator doesn't stop. They need to see the files. They need to know how long this has been happening. The fire lookout tower is a skeleton. The wooden frame collapsed inward, stairs rotted through, windows long gone. It hasn't been operational since 1973 according to the faded metal placard bolted to the remaining support beam. Samuel leads the narrator around to the north side, where the foundation meets the hillside. He kneels and clears away moss and forest duff, revealing a recessed metal panel. "Help me with this," he says. Together they pry it open. Underneath, a weatherproof container, military surplus, the kind used for long-term equipment storage in harsh environments. Samuel pulls it out and opens the latches. Inside, personnel files. 19 of them. Manila folders, edges worn, organized chronologically. The narrator picks up the first one. Dated April 1952. Name, Dr. Raymond Voss. The same name from the original memo Samuel showed them. Assignment orders, elk population study, Olympic Peninsula, Ho River drainage, duration 14 days. Psychological evaluation, suitable for independent fieldwork. High attention to detail. Low risk profile. And a photo. Except the photo is corrupted. The face is blurred into an unrecognizable smear, like the image degraded over time, but only the facial features. The background, the clothing, the hands are all sharp and clear. Just the face gone. A handwritten note in the margin, different ink, added later. Replacement successful, deployed to redacted. Original unrecovered, presumed lost. The narrator goes through the files one by one. 1956, Dr. Helen Marchant. Wildlife ecologist. Photo corrupted. Copy past polygraphy and biometric screening. 1963, Thomas Brenner. Field researcher. Photo corrupted. Replacement deployed to redacted. High performance marks. 1974, Dr. Samuel Hodge. The narrator looks up at Samuel. He nods slowly. "I'm in there. They tried to replace me. I got out before the conversion was completed, but they still extracted something. A partial copy, maybe. I don't know where it went." The narrator keeps reading. 1981, Angela Cortez. 1987, David Kim. 1992, Dr. Elizabeth Oakes. All the same pattern. All deployed to redacted locations. All considered successful replacements. The most recent file is dated 6 months ago. Dr. Marissa Chen. Wildlife biologist, PhD from Stanford. Age 31. Her photo is the least degraded. The face is blurred, but you can almost make out features, dark hair, narrow jaw, the suggestion of glasses. The final note, replacement deployed to CDC in Atlanta. The original remains in the observation zone. Considered non-viable for retrieval. Copy performing above baseline expectations. No deviation detected. The narrator sets the file down carefully. This isn't a containment failure. It's a program. The Forest Service, or something higher, something with access to researchers across multiple agencies, is using the entity as a factory. A production line for perfect human replicas. People with all the memories, all the skills, all the mannerisms of the original. But no autonomy. No moral complexity. No capacity for deviation or disobedience. Ideal personnel for Black Ops research. Intelligence work. Oversight positions. Anywhere you need someone brilliant and compliant in equal measure. The originals are sacrificed. The copies believe they survived, and no one can tell the difference. The narrator hears an engine. Distant. Downslope. The access road. They stand and move to the edge of the clearing where they can see the trailhead parking area, 2 kilometers below through breaks in the timber. A figure is walking toward a parked truck. The narrator's truck. Same build. Same jacket. Same gait. The figure opens the door, loads a pack into the passenger seat, and starts the engine. The narrator runs. Crashes downhill through undergrowth, boots skidding on wet moss, branches whipping across their face. They're not going to make it. The truck is already moving, turning onto the access road, accelerating. The narrator reaches the trailhead 30 seconds too late. Stands in the empty parking area, breathing hard, watching taillights disappear around the first switchback. That was them. The replacement. Driving away to live their life. The narrator had seen the truck from the ridgeline, but by the time they crashed through the last stretch of forest and stumbled onto the gravel access road, the figure was already there. Dressed in identical field clothes. Same build. Same way of carrying weight on the left side to compensate for an old knee injury. Walking toward the narrator's truck with keys already in hand. The narrator's truck, which should be locked, which should require fumbling through pockets to find the key fob. The replacement opens the door smoothly. No hesitation. It knows exactly where the keys were kept, left cargo pocket, clipped to a carabiner with the compass and whistle. Loads a backpack into the passenger seat. The duplicate gear from the staged camp. Start the engine. The narrator sprints forward, legs pumping, boots throwing gravel. Wait. Stop. The replacement adjusts the rearview mirror. Make direct eye contact. The narrator sees their own face looking back. Composed. No confusion. No fear. Just acknowledgement. Then the truck reverses, turns, and accelerates down the access road. The narrator chases it. Runs as hard as they can, lungs burning, vision narrowing. But they feel sluggish. Heavy. Like moving through water instead of air. Their legs aren't responding right. Each step takes more effort than it should. They're slower. Weaker. Less solid. The truck disappears around the first switchback, engine noise fading into the forest. The narrator keeps running for another 50 meters before their legs give out. They collapse onto the gravel, gasping, hands braced on their knees. Samuel catches up a minute later, breathing hard, leaning on his walking stick. "It's out," he says quietly. "It'll drive to your apartment. Check in with your supervisor. File the final report. And then it'll live your life." The narrator can't respond. Can't catch their breath. "And it'll do it better than you ever did," Samuel continues. No doubt. No hesitation. No fear. It won't second-guess decisions. Won't lose sleep over ethical dilemmas. It'll be the version of you that never questioned whether you were good enough. Someone will notice. The narrator manages. Friends. Family. Co-workers. Samuel shakes his head. The copies are perfect. Better than perfect. They have all your memories, all your mannerisms. They'll call your mother on her birthday. They'll remember inside jokes. They'll know which coffee shop you go to and what you order. He pauses. They're what you would be if you never questioned yourself. And most people prefer that version. The narrator stares down the empty road. "Is there anything left in the cache?" they ask. "Anything that explains how to stop this?" Samuel considers for a moment. "There's one more document. I didn't show you because it's extreme. But if you're past 70% conversion and you want to try." He trails off. "Show me." They hike back to the lookout tower. Samuel pulls a thin folder from the bottom of the container, separate from the personnel files. Typewritten cover page, faded with age. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Research Division Field Protocol. Our anchoring material existence classified 1957. The narrator opens it and starts reading. The document is typewritten on yellowed paper, edges brittle with age. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Research Division Field Protocol. Our anchoring material existence classified 1957. The narrator reads quickly, hands shaking. The introduction describes the phenomenon in clinical terms. Subject experiences progressive conversion from matter-based existence to observational data state. Particle interactions decrease. Electromagnetic signature diminishes. The subject remains conscious but loses material registration in consensus reality. Then the protocol itself. Our anchoring via quantum decoherence. Principle: introduce ferromagnetic particles into the subject's system at sufficient concentration to force quantum-level interaction. Magnetite, Fe3O4, particles possess strong magnetic moments that cannot exist in probabilistic states. They must interact with local magnetic fields definitively. When distributed through biological tissue, they force surrounding matter to collapse into definite quantum states to accommodate magnetic field geometry. Formula: subject body mass, kg, times 0.02 equals required magnetite dose, grams. Administration: dissolve magnetite powder in 500 milliliters distilled water. The subject must consume the entire solution within a 10-minute window. Particles distribute via bloodstream and interstitial fluid, reaching cellular saturation within 15 to 20 minutes. The narrator keeps reading. Expected physiological response: severe nausea, temporary muscle paralysis, duration 2 to 6 hours, extreme sensitivity to magnetic fields, possible unconsciousness. The subject will experience intense sensation as the nervous system reestablishes electromagnetic function. Success rate: 60% if administered before 80% conversion threshold. Below 50% if the subject exceeds the threshold. Subjects beyond 85% conversion show negligible response. The narrator looks up at Samuel. You have this? Magnetite? Samuel nods slowly. Medical grade. I've kept a supply for 40 years. Just in case. I'm past 80%, the narrator says. I don't have a shadow. I know. The success rate is low, Samuel finishes. But it's not zero. And it's the only option you have left. The narrator does the math. Body weight, 68 kilograms. Times 0.02. 1.36 grams of magnetite required. Samuel pulls a small glass vial from his pack. Black powder, fine as flour. He measures it carefully using a jeweler's scale pulled from the same pack, then dissolves it in a metal canteen filled with distilled water. The mixture looks like ink. Swirls of black suspended in clear liquid. He hands it to the narrator. Drink it all. Don't stop. The particles need to reach saturation quickly or they'll just pass through your system without anchoring. The narrator unscrews the cap. The liquid smells like iron and something else, ozone, maybe, or oxidized metal. They raise it to their lips and drink. It tastes like blood and rust. They force it down, throat working, fighting the gag reflex. The texture is gritty, particles scraping against their esophagus. Halfway through, their stomach rebels. They keep drinking. 3/4 gone. Their hands are shaking, vision blurring at the edges. They finish it. Lower the canteen. Breathe. For 5 seconds, nothing happens. Then their nervous system ignites. Not pain. Sensation. Overwhelming, all-consuming sensation. Every nerve firing simultaneously. They can feel their heartbeat in their fingertips, their teeth, their scalp. The magnetic particles are distributed through capillaries, forcing quantum collapse at the cellular level, making their body interact with the Earth's magnetic field in ways it hasn't for the past 60 hours. Their muscles lock. They collapse onto their side, unable to move, every fiber of their being screaming with input. They can feel the planet's magnetic field lines passing through them, can sense the iron in their blood aligning, oscillating, fighting to orient itself. Their vision goes white, then black, then something in between, a gray static like untuned television. When it clears, they're lying on the ground, Samuel kneeling beside them. The narrator looks at their hand. There's a shadow beneath it. Definite. They pull out the EMF detector with trembling fingers. Pointed at themselves. The reading jumps to 11 millivolts. They're back. Material. Registered. But when they look up at the forest around them, something is wrong. The elk herd is gone. And the trees are watching. 6 weeks later, the narrator sits in a conference room on the 4th floor of the Forest Service Pacific Northwest Regional Headquarters in Portland. The room smells like stale coffee and dry erase markers. Rain streaks the windows. Dr. Ellen Cross sits across the table, reading from a printed report. Researcher experienced acute dehydration and environmental stress leading to disorientation. She reads aloud, voice flat and administrative. Successfully extracted by an aerial rescue team on day 9. Medical evaluation complete. Psychological fitness evaluation pending. Recommends 6-month administrative leave. The narrator's left hand rests on the table. No cast. No visible injury. The magnetite protocol worked without physical trauma. Just the neurological reset, the forced quantum collapse. But the report Ellen is reading describes something different. Describes self-injury. Describes fractures that never happened. The narrator doesn't correct her. The report makes no mention of duplicate camps. Silent elk. Replacement entities. Quantum conversion. Just dehydration. Just a researcher who stayed in the field too long. Ellen sets the report down and looks up. You're lucky, she says. Most people who get disoriented out there don't make it back. The narrator nods. They know the helicopter only came after the magnetite re-anchored them to material reality. Only after they existed solidly enough to register on flight manifests and rescue protocols. Before that, they were unrecoverable. Ellen slides a form across the table. Sign here. Acknowledges receipt of medical leave paperwork and fitness for duty evaluation timeline. The narrator signs. The pen feels light in their hand, like it might pass through their fingers if they don't concentrate. Take the time you need, Ellen says, not unkindly. The field will still be there when you're ready. The narrator stands, takes the paperwork, and leaves the conference room. In the hallway, they pass a young researcher, mid-20s, eager expression, reviewing a document on a clipboard. The researcher looks up. Excuse me, do you know where Dr. Cross's office is? The narrator points down the hall. Through the open conference room door, Ellen's voice carries. You'll be conducting a population survey in the Hoh River drainage. Beautiful area. Very quiet. 2 weeks, solo assignment. Standard protocol. The narrator stops walking. Opens their mouths to warn the young researcher. To say anything, don't go, it's not what you think, the 72-hour window is real. No sound comes out. They try again. Nothing. not mute, not voiceless. The space where sound should emerge is just absent, like speaking into a void that swallows the vibration before it can propagate. The young researcher walks past them into the conference room, oblivious. The narrator pulls out their phone, hands shaking. Open the contacts list. Empty. No names. No numbers. Photo gallery, landscapes. Equipment. Topographic maps. Trail markers. No people. Not even selfies. They never existed in frame. They open the Forest Service Employee Database app, navigate to their own profile. The photo field is blank. Just a gray silhouette placeholder. Biotext reads, personnel file corrupted. Restore from backup unavailable. The narrator walks to the parking garage, boots echoing on concrete. Their truck is there. Same spot they always park. The replacement must have returned it. They get in, close the door, and pull down the visor mirror. Their reflection appears. 3 seconds late. The delay is shorter than it was in the forest. Back then it was 5, 6 seconds. But it's still there. Still not fully synchronized. They're mostly real. Mostly material. But the edges are blurry. Their phone buzzes. Email notification. From Dr. Ellen Cross subject. Personnel update, thank you for your service. Your replacement has been successfully integrated into active duty. Please do not attempt further contact with this office. All future inquiries should be directed to HR. An attachment, photo_2847.jpg. The narrator opens it. The image shows them, the replacement, shaking hands with a Department of Interior official at some formal event. Conference room backdrop. Flags. Other people in suits. The replacement is smiling. Confidence. Posture perfect. Better than the narrator ever looked in professional settings. No hesitation in the eyes. No uncertainty. Just competence. Clarity. The version of themselves they always tried to be but could never quite manage. The narrator closes the email. Start the engine. Pulls out of the parking garage and drives east, away from the coast, away from the forests, toward the high desert where trees are sparse and elk don't live. As they merge onto I-84, they glance at their left hand on the steering wheel. No injury. No pain. But they remember breaking those fingers with a rock. Remember the white-hot agony, the proof of material existence. Except that never happened. The magnetite worked without trauma. So why do they remember it? Is the memory real? Or is it just data the replacement inherited, a false anchor, a phantom pain designed to make them believe they're still the original? They don't know. And 600 miles later, somewhere near the Idaho border, they still don't have an answer. The narrator lives in eastern Oregon now. High desert, sagebrush and basalt. No forests, no elk. They work remotely. Data analysis. Contract work for environmental agencies that don't require field presence. They never go into the woods anymore. There's a specific behavioral change people have noticed. Every 6 weeks, the narrator has a minor injury. Sprained wrist, bruised rib, jammed finger. People assume it's self-harm. PTSD from whatever happened in Olympic National Park. Let them think that. The truth is worse. The magnetite wears off. Quantum decoherence is temporary. Every 6 weeks, they have to re-anchor, consume another dose, force their body to interact with magnetic fields, prove to the universe they're still made of particles that push back. Without it, they start to fade again. 3 months after leaving the park, a package arrives. No return address. Plain brown shipping box. Inside, a field journal. Write in the rain, olive drab cover. Coffee stained. Dirt smudges on the corners. Pages warped from moisture. The real one. The narrator opens it. Their handwriting, actual handwriting, inconsistent and human, fills the pages. A note is tucked inside the back cover. Same handwriting. I'm still in the forest. I can feel myself fading, but I'm still here. If you're reading this, you're the copy. You won the fight for the name, the life, the body. I don't blame you. You're me. Better me. But sometimes, when you look in the mirror and see the delay, you'll wonder. And that's all I have left. The doubt. The narrator closes the journal, walks to the bathroom, pulls down the mirror. The reflection blinks first this time. Before they do, they survived. But they're not sure they're still the one who went into the forest. And if they're the copy, where is the original?